Welcome to the wacky world of AvtoVAZ, where cars are made with equal parts ingenuity and vodka. If you're not familiar with AvtoVAZ, then allow me to introduce you to the Russian car manufacturer that's been making waves since 1966. And by waves, I mean cars that make you wonder if the engineers were sober when they designed them. But hey, let's not judge too harshly. AvtoVAZ has given us some classic vehicles that will go down in history as legendary, or at least they'll go down as something. From the iconic Lada Niva to the budget-friendly Granta, AvtoVAZ has produced some vehicles that are equal parts quirky and cool. So sit back and let's take a ride through the strange and wonderful world of AvtoVAZ. You might just find yourself falling in love with a car that looks like it was designed by a drunken bear. AvtoVAZ 2103. The sedan that changed the game, or at least tried to. This classic Soviet-era car was meant to be a competitor to the Western European cars of the time, but let's just say it fell a little short. Don't get me wrong. The 2103 had its merits. It was reliable, efficient, and had that distinct Soviet aesthetic that made it stand out from the crowd. But it also had some quirks that made it less than desirable. For one, the front seats were about as comfortable as a park bench. And let's not forget the classic Lada joke. Why does a Lada have a heated rear windshield? To keep your hands warm when you're pushing it. But all jokes aside, the 2103 did have an impact on the automotive industry. It paved the way for other Soviet-era cars to make their mark. And even today, it's a beloved classic for car enthusiasts around the world. So here's to you, AvtoVAZ 2103. You may not have been perfect, but you were certainly unforgettable. AvtoVAZ 2107. If there's one car that embodies the Soviet era, it's the AvtoVAZ 2107. This classic car has become an icon in the automotive world, thanks to its distinct Soviet design and reliability that would make a tank jealous. The 2107 may not have been the fastest car on the road, but it certainly had a charm all its own. It was the car that could get you from point A to point B, even if it wasn't the smoothest ride. But all kidding aside, the 2107 was a beloved classic for a reason. It was dependable, affordable, and had that classic Soviet-era aesthetic that still captures our imaginations today. So here's to you, AvtoVAZ 2107. You may not have been flashy, but you were certainly unforgettable. AvtoVAZ Samara. The AvtoVAZ Samara was a revolution in small cars. It was the car that proved that you didn't need a fancy sports car to turn heads on the road. You just needed a car that looked like a jelly bean and had a name that made you think of a tropical paradise. Now, the Samara wasn't perfect. It had its fair share of quirks, like a transmission that sounded like a blender full of rocks. But despite its flaws, the Samara was a beloved classic for many. It was the car that proved that sometimes the weirdest cars are the ones that steal your heart. So here's to you, AvtoVAZ Samara. You may have looked like a gumball on wheels, but you were certainly unforgettable. AvtoVAZ Vesta. The AvtoVAZ Vesta was a contemporary take on classic design, and it certainly turned heads when it hit the market. This modern beauty had a sleek design, comfortable interior, and all the latest bells and whistles. It was a car that made you think, wow, the Soviets have really come a long way. Despite the jokes, the Vesta was a beloved classic for many. It proved that sometimes the Soviets could make a car that was just as good as the Western competition. So here's to you, AvtoVAZ Vesta. You may not have been perfect, but you certainly made us laugh. AvtoVAZ Kalina. The AvtoVAZ Kalina was a compact car with a big personality. It may have been small, but it packed a punch on the road. The Kalina was the car that proved that you didn't need a big fancy car to be a badass on the road. Now, the Kalina may have had some quirks, like a backseat that was more like a punishment than a privilege. But despite its flaws, the Kalina was a beloved classic for many. It was the car that proved that sometimes it's the smallest things that make the biggest impact. So here's to you, AvtoVAZ Kalina. You may have been small, but you were certainly mighty. Hey there, fellow car enthusiasts. If you're enjoying this video as much as we're enjoying making it, then we have a simple request for you. Hit that subscribe button and share this video with your friends. Not only will you be helping us reach more people, but you'll also be giving us a reason to keep creating ridiculous content. And let's be honest, we need all the motivation we can get. Oh, and don't forget to hit that notification bell too. That way you'll be the first to know when we release our next masterpiece. And who knows, Maybe one day we'll create a car that's powered by your sheer enthusiasm. So subscribe, share, and ring that bell. Let's keep the love train rolling. Moving on. The AvtoVAZ 2106 was a car that defined an era. It was the car that proved that you could look cool while driving a car that sounded like a lawnmower. This classic beauty had a design that was straight out of the 70s, complete with faux wood paneling and a cigarette lighter that doubled as a blowtorch. Now, the 2106 may have had some quirks, like a transmission that could make you feel like you were rowing a boat. And let's not forget the classic joke, why does a Lada 2106 have a sunroof? So you can see the stars as you wait for the tow truck. Despite its flaws, the 2106 was a beloved classic for many. It was the car that proved that sometimes it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So here's to you, AvtoVAZ 2106. You may have been a little rough around the edges, but you certainly had style. The AvtoVAZ Lada Niva was the Russian off-road legend that had everyone talking. It was the car that could handle anything you threw at it. Mud, snow, ice, or even a bear. Yes, a bear. This rugged beauty was the car that proved that you didn't need a fancy SUV to conquer the wilderness. Now, the Niva may have had some quirks, like a heater that worked a little too well and could turn your car into a sauna. Despite its flaws, the Niva was a beloved classic for many. It was the car that proved that sometimes the best things in life are a little rough around the edges. So here's to you, AvtoVAZ Lada Niva. You may have been a little wild, but we loved you anyway. The AvtoVAZ Granta was a budget car that didn't skimp on quality. It was the car that proved that you didn't need to break the bank to own a car that looked like $1 million. This sleek beauty had a design that was both stylish and functional, with features that put more expensive cars to shame. Now, the Granta may have had some quirks, like a stereo system that sounded like it was coming out of a tin can. And let's not forget the classic joke. Why does a Lada Granta have power windows? So you can roll them down and push the car when it breaks down. But despite its flaws, the Granta was a beloved classic for many. It was a car that proved that sometimes less is more. So here's to you, AvtoVAZ Granta. You may have been affordable, but you were certainly not cheap. The AvtoVAZ 1111 Oka was a tiny car that made a big impression. It was a car that proved that good things do come in small packages, even if the package looked like a toy car. This pint-sized beauty was a design that was both cute and practical, with a fuel efficiency that made hybrid cars jealous. Now, the Oka may have had some quirks, like a turning radius that made it feel like you were driving a shopping cart. But despite its flaws, the Oka was a beloved classic for many. It was the car that proved that size doesn't matter when it comes to having fun on the road. So here's to you, AvtoVAZ Oka. You may have been tiny, but you left a big impression on our hearts. And finally, the AvtoVAZ 2101, the car that started it all. It was the car that proved that even a company named Lada could make a great car. This classic beauty had a design that was both timeless and charming, with features that made other cars look like they were designed by kindergartners. Now, the 2101 may have had some quirks, like a heater that barely worked in the Siberian winter, but despite its flaws, the 2101 was a beloved classic for many. It was the car that proved that a little bit of Soviet engineering could go a long way. So here's to you, AvtoVAZ 2101. You may have been a simple car, but you started a revolution, and that will never be forgotten. Well, folks, we've reached the end of our journey through AvtoVAZ 10's model. We've laughed, we've cried, and we've probably made a few Soviet-era jokes along the way. But in all seriousness, AvtoVAZ has had a lasting impact on the automotive world. They prove that a little bit of ingenuity and a lot of determination can go a long way in making great cars. And let's not forget, they gave us the Lada Niva, the only car that could survive the apocalypse. And for the future of AvtoVAZ, who knows what's in store? Maybe they'll surprise us with a self-driving Lada or a car that runs on vodka. All we know is that we'll be eagerly waiting to see what they come up with next. So here's to you, AvtoVAZ. Thanks for the memories, the laughs, and the car that we'll always remember fondly. Keep on driving and keep on making us smile. Well, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You clearly have excellent taste in videos. But before you move on to the next video, we have a suggestion for you. You know what's almost as endangered as some of the cars on this list? The species of sedan. That's right, folks. We're talking about the giraffes, rhinos, and elephants that desperately need our help. So if you're feeling generous and want to make a difference, check out our next video on the endangered species of Sudan. It might not be as funny as this one, but it's definitely more important. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be driving electric cars that are powered by elephant dung. Hey, it could happen!